Hello, I wanted to talk to you this morning about data analysis. I've created some examples related to doing analysis of a survey. The survey is pretty just basic summary of the data that's there. And then I will also walk you through how to analyze qualitative data, be it field notes, interviews, a document, etc. All right, so let me see if I can remember how to share my screen. Let's see. All right. Sorry, forgot I had so much stuff up. All right, so let me first share with you a survey summary. All right, so for the survey summary, pretty basic. There's a couple things that I have. I have the title here. You can ignore the Appendix F part. This was part of a larger report. So you don't need an appendix title, but you do need a title. Tell us what the survey is, tell us when it was done, and then tell us the N. The N is simply the number of respondents for the survey. Then I basically go through each question, and then I tell you if the N differed, and I also tell you the percentages. So I asked about people's degrees. There were 7 people that got a BS. There was 11 people that got a BA, and then I had the percentages. These are all demographic questions here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. All right. For this question, it says this year the project has been able to attract minority students into mathematics and science teaching. Here are the categories. This was a Likert scale, and you can see how many people selected the answer and what the percentages were. And the reason why the percentages are helpful, it just gives you a sense of how many people are answering and how they're answering the question. Now this is appropriate for a Likert scale type of survey response. And I'm going to show you one other option. All right. So this is a pre-post survey, and let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. So basically for this one, I have all of the items here. So basically it was a pre-post survey. Actually, I think it was a retrospective pre-post survey, and it asks the participants about their perspectives on each of these different items. And this was a volunteer recruitment project, and it was asking them the extent to which the project really helped them develop these different volunteer recruitment skills. And there were 4 different response choices. So basically, each response choice was given a number, 1 through 4, the lowest being 1, the highest choice being 4. And then we gave these, let's see, we gave these, we gave the numbers, and then we took all of the different participants for each response for each particular line. So everybody's answer for written volunteer recruitment plan for the pre-test, we looked to see, okay, how many people answered 1, how many people answered 2, how many people answered 3, how many people answered 4. We added all of them up, and then we took an average, or we did the mean. Same thing for the post-test. We looked to see how many people responded, answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, answer 4, and then we found the mean or the average of that, and then we found the standard deviation, and then we found the effect size. So the effect size is basically looking at the difference between the pre-test mean and the post-test mean. And up here in this paragraph, it talks about how to interpret effect size. And so I don't think anybody is doing a pre-test and a post-test. But if you are doing a pre-test and a post-test, then you would need to do the means, the standard deviation, and the effect size, or some other statistical calculation that would allow you to determine the change from pre-test to post-test. And typically that would be a t-test, and I don't have the t-test results displayed here, but if you would like to do, if you're using a pre-test, post-test, or a retrospective pre-test, let me know and I can talk to you more about how to really display those particular results. But I think that for most people, doing the percentages is going to be the best way to go for your Likert scale items. If the percentages doesn't work and you have to use, and you need to use the means and difference in between means, let me know and I can give you more information about how to do that. All right. And then some of you are using surveys, but you're using mostly open-ended responses. And so we'll treat the open-ended responses as qualitative data. All right, so let's jump into the qualitative data. All right, so for qualitative data, I use this example, and this I guess would be, this is not an interview. I guess the closest thing would be to kind of like a document where you're analyzing what somebody's already said. Might also seem somewhat like field notes, but either way, with qualitative data, you're going to have a lot of words. And as the Boji text describes, basically you've got to disassemble those words. You've got to take them apart through a process called coding. So what I've done here is I've basically shown you how I coded. Coding is just, it's marking the data. And so you want to code fairly, you want to code tightly. One of the biggest mistakes I see for novice researchers is that they might, instead of having all of these codes for just this one paragraph here, you see all the codes associated with it over here on the side, they might have one code for the entire paragraph. If you only put one code in the entire paragraph, you're going to miss important ideas. So you need to at least have one code per line. At least. You might have multiple codes per line, but don't be afraid to code very tightly. You want to disassemble your data, but if you don't disassemble all of it, you're going to have big gaps, and that won't give you the rich analysis that you're looking for. So basically, I go through and I mark the different pieces of data, and the way I do that is I just highlight, and then I add a comment. Okay. So highlight, add comment. Black Lives Matter is a farce. I included that as one segment of text because I felt like the meaning of it went together and I didn't want to separate those things. And then the next code that I highlighted hyphenating, but I've got over here hyphenating America because I feel like that's another segment of meaning. And then destroys us is the next segment of meaning. So notice I've kind of broken all of this up. I'm coding, it's called in vivo coding. I'm using the exact words of the participants. And this is also open coding because I'm just letting whatever emerges from the text, that's what I'm putting down. I'm not going in with preconceived codes. It's whatever is emerging from the text. So I go through and I mark each particular segment of the text. I put it over here and I mark it as with a text segment label. These labels are what I refer to as codes. So I've coded this first paragraph here, and then I've coded this second paragraph here. I definitely recommend if you're trying to figure out how to code, go back, take a look at the way that I've segmented the text. I've just broken it down into little chunks, and then I've put the labels for the chunks over here on the side. Once you've coded the entire, now this is just 2 paragraphs, you're going to be coding multiple paragraphs. So you may want to think about how you can break it up because it does get somewhat tedious. But anyway, I've just given you an example of 2 paragraphs here. So I've got the 2 paragraphs here. Then once I've coded everything, basically I'm going to pull all my codes. So here are all my codes here. And basically to do that, I just copied and pasted. So Black Lives Matter is a farce. I copied and I put it down here. The line numbers shouldn't be there, so just kind of ignore those. I didn't take the formatting off though. Hyphenating America destroys us. Again, I just copied and I pasted it here. So I have a list of codes. Here's my code list. So I've open coded these 2 paragraphs just to see kind of what was there. taking stock of what was there. I've disassembled it. I've labeled it. Then I took the codes, I made it into a code list. Now this code list is not organized, it's just a list of codes. And so my next step is to organize these codes and put them into themes, which is called axial coding. All right, so by theming, I'm just going to put the ones that go together, right? So I might move Black Lives Matter as a farce. I might move that down here. I would recommend if you're going to move your codes around within the text, make sure you make a copy of that original list first before you start moving everything around. Some people like to put their code list in Excel just because it's easier for them to manipulate and move around the words. But whatever you do, just make sure you're keeping copies of what you create as you go, because you might need it later. All right, so I'm going to keep moving things around, putting things together. And just to kind of show you what that list looks like once it's been put together, I'm going to come over here. All right. And here's how I ended up moving everything together. And these are the same codes, but I have lumped them all together. I put together the ideas that were similar, and I came up with these different categories. So I have one category here, mockery and destruction of America, first responders, and then blaming those in positions of power. So I have these labeled, but the next step, and this is a step that I didn't include here, is I need to actually say more about what these themes are. I have mockery and destruction of America, but based on these codes, it's more than mockery and destruction of America. There's actually a sense of who is creating a mockery and destruction of America, right? She's talking about Black Lives Matter. And then here she says hyphenating America. Which is a reference to things like Asian American, African American, Indian American, not just being fully American. So this idea that, really focusing on identity is something that is divisive, and it's actually breaking America apart. And actually she says it's destroying us. So I would want to add some description to this theme. That way it's more clear what the theme is. So don't just give me the category. Explain the category. Tell me what it means. Same thing here with first responders. So I've got first responders here, but there's more to it than just first responders. Like, she's not talking about firefighters. She's mostly talking about police officers here. And there's a particular tone about these police officers, prayers with fallen, lost heroes, being courageous. So how could we fully describe this category of first responders? And I mean, I say fully describe, give me a few sentences that tell us what this theme is. That would be really good. All right. And then blaming those, it should say in positions of power. So what does that mean, right? What do I mean by blaming those in positions of power? Well, let's see. She says she's casting shame on people that have the power to influence people. And she says, though, that people in position of power are leading us to contention, division, and evil, right? So she's not she's saying that these problems related to evil and people rioting are partly the fault of the people in positions of power. So again, I can just write a few sentences that explains what that means. And this is another area where I see novice researchers kind of fall down a little bit. And it's you might see these categories and be like, oh, I know exactly what this means, but it's your job to tell us what it means. If you don't know, like if you're looking at this and you're like, what is this? What is all of this? I know because I've actually gone through the data. So it's my responsibility to tell you. And so write a few sentences that explains kind of what these themes mean. Just because you label the theme doesn't mean that's enough information with a couple words. If you label with a couple words, it doesn't mean it's enough information for us to actually know what's going on. So be sure to give us a couple sentences that explains what this means. All right, so in terms of your assignment, basically it just says, do the coding, turn it in. And so what am I looking for in terms of your coding and the themes that you come up with? I would like to see all of the pieces that I've just shared with you, in addition to adding a few sentences to explain what each of your themes mean. So I want you to turn in your transcript that's been coded. I want to see the actual codes. If you use another program to code, that's fine, but I need to be able to see how you've coded whatever transcript you have or whatever document you have. And then I want to see how you've taken those. I want to see the code list, and then I want to see how you've taken the codes and you've broken it into themes. So it would be fine if you turn in a Word document that kind of has all of those different layers, but just make sure you label the different pieces of the document so I know what it is. But basically, I just want to see your thought process. So transcript with codes, code list, and then I want to see you go from your code list to your themes, and make sure with the themes that you give us a couple sentences that describe what the theme actually means. All right, so this is inductive coding. So inductive meaning the ideas emerge from the text. I haven't pushed anything into it, but everything is coming out of the text. So whatever, this is a great way to code when you first get your data, because you want to just see what emerges, what comes from the text. You don't want to layer any ideas from your lit review or from your theoretical framework on. You just want to see what kind of pops out. All right, so that's an example of inductive coding. All right, so then I also want you to think about deductive coding. And so for deductive coding, you're basically coding with the start list. So you created or you've put together a theoretical framework. Some of you have a specified theory that has like theory attached. It says theory in the title. Others of you have put together ideas from the literature. Regardless of your approach, you should be able to create a start list of codes, and you're going to take that directly from your theoretical framework section. And so basically my theoretical framework is related to institutional oppression. I don't have my citations and everything like that here, because at this stage I've already given you the citations, I already explained all of that. Now I'm taking all that information and I'm breaking it down so that I have a list of codes. So here are my codes. These are my deductive codes: institutional oppression, power, control, knowledge, construction, privilege, also known as benefit or unmerited reward, and oppression, which is also marginalization, trouble, unmerited difficulty, or challenge. So now that I have a sense of, my theoretical framework and how I've kind of broken it down, basically I'm breaking it down into chunks that are manageable. I'm going to go back into my transcript, and I'm going to take a look for these specific things. So notice how this is different from open coding. With open coding, I started off by just seeing what came out. This time I'm pushing information into my transcript. So I'm going to take these codes, and then I'm going to reread my transcript. Here it is. And then I'm going to mark the transcript using these particular codes. So Black Lives Matter is a farce. I've labeled that as control. Hyphenating America, I've labeled that as knowledge construction. Destroys us, I'm labeling that as oppression. Then Blue Line in Dallas, that is a form of oppression. Police officers got killed, oppression. So I'm labeling all of these particular things using my theoretical framework. Okay. And then after I've labeled everything with my theoretical framework, I come down here, and similarly to open coding, kind of similar but a little bit different, I want to put all of the, I already kind of have my ideas here, like control. I'm going to pull all of the places where I coded for control to see what the text says. And so all of the places where I label control actually say Black Lives Matter is a farce. I'm going to pull everything for knowledge construction. Hyphenating America destroys us. I'm going to pull everything for oppression, lost heroes, thin blue line, thugs rioting against police officers, rule of law. I pulled everything that was labeled unmerited difficulty. All right. And knowledge construction, I have it in two different places. That's an accident. So this is another part of the process. You're just kind of moving things around. So I'm just going to move that up there, and I can delete out this category here. All right. So now I've got everything labeled by the codes that I created, but I'm still not done yet. I've got to figure out, do I need to collapse additional categories? What does all of this mean? So let's start here with this oppression category. All right, what do you notice about everything that's been put in oppression. Lost heroes last night, thin blue line in Dallas, thugs rioting against police officers, and the rule of law. Who's being oppressed in this transcript here? Well, it's obvious that the police officers are being oppressed, according to Sarah Palin. So I think that would be an important note as I'm kind of describing, these themes and kind of what emerges related to the theoretical framework. So I'm just going to add that here. All right, let's see what else we have here. Black Lives Matter is a farce. So we've got, and I put Black Lives Matter as a farce under control because a farce is like making mockery of something. It's kind of shifting the way people think about something, right? So shifting the way people think is similar to how people are constructing knowledge. So I might be able to collapse these two categories because it's all about helping people to think a certain way. And not only is it helping people to think a certain way, if we combine control, I'm just going to say this, control and knowledge construction. I'm going to delete this. All right, so you see how I'm just kind of like collapsing and moving things together. So control and knowledge construction, but look at what she says here. Black Lives Matter is a farce. Hype and Native American destroys us. This is, and then I have culture's influencers, which I'm not sure that goes there. I might need to think about that. But anyway, this is not positive. She's not saying control and knowledge construction in a good way, right? So I would want to maybe add a few sentences here about how she's negative about Black Lives Matter, and she feels like this focus on identity, hyphenating America, is actually destroying our country. So those might be the sentences that I use to describe this particular section on control and knowledge construction. All right, and let's see. Unmerited difficulty or challenge. That's talking about police officers. I might want to collapse this because it's kind of describing part of the same thing. Oh, sorry, that's my alarm going off. All right, let's see. All right, so I might collapse this. All right, and if I look back at my original kind of schema here, this idea of unmerited difficulty or challenge is a type of oppression. So it kind of makes sense that those would go together. So I'm just going to collapse that. And then this idea of power here. So stirring contention and division, leading to evil, giving credence. And then, but I'm not sure here who's giving credence and who's leading to evil. So I'm not sure. Since I have questions, I should go back to my transcript about who's actually causing this evil here. The culture's influencers here and politicians and pundits. See, I didn't code tightly enough here because if I did, that would have been coded. And I'm going to code that as power. All right. Politicians and pundits. And then I'm going to move that back down. This way it's just more clear here, who's actually has this power. And then this culture's influencer seems to go here as well. So I'm going to move that down. All right, so you can see that I've got these different sections of the text. I'm moving it around. I'm trying to kind of collapse things together in order to make meaning and understand what's going on here. So all right, control and knowledge destruction. I can write a few sentences about that. Power and oppression, police officers. I can write a few sentences about that. And then this idea of power. It says we know that it's the cultural influencers, politicians, and pundits. They're the ones that are kind of saying, "Okay, this is fine. We can do this. This can happen." And that would be. I can use those ideas to kind of describe power and what's going on, and then. If I was to step back, I could then start to tell the story about these three themes together and how they really come together to tell a story. Not necessarily my story or the story that I believe in, but Sarah Palin's story and what she's saying. And this is another important note. As I'm going through and coding this, Sarah Palin's ideas and how I'm interpreting Sarah Palin's ideas. It's not necessarily what I think. The research doesn't necessarily validate or support my ideas. What I do as a researcher is I'm kind of giving voice to and trying to understand somebody else's ideas. So a lot of people want to do research because they're like, well, I think this is what's going on. I want to prove my ideas. No, you're not proving your ideas. You're using other people's ideas and you're trying to understand other people's ideas. It doesn't mean that you actually believe or agree with what's being said, but you're just trying to understand other perspectives. And I think that that's an important distinction. So this would be deductive coding. Again, I started with a start list of codes. The start list of codes is based on my theoretical framework, based on my literature, which is one big reason why I've been saying all along, make sure you really know the theoretical framework and you really have a sense of what you're saying, because it makes it much easier when you get to this phase of your data analysis. Some of you may have to go back and think a little bit more about your theoretical framework. If you can't create kind of a start list of codes and you don't know how to go from, okay, this is what the literature says, now I'm going to use that to take a look at what my data says. So that's just something to keep in mind. So again, I want to see for your assignment 3, I want to see the inductive coding process. I want to see the deductive coding process. It's fine for you to put it all in a document just like I have here. Just make sure you label what each section is, and that's something that I didn't do, but I want to label here like my codes from the theoretical framework. Then I'd want to label here, themes from the theoretical framework. Just go through and make sure each piece is labeled. So hopefully you've seen an example here of how to basically segment the data and then put it back together. The coding process is you segmenting the data, and when you're putting it into themes, that's when you're putting it back together and making meaning of it. And be sure that you explain what your themes are and what the themes mean. That way it's clear how you're putting it back together and making meaning of it. I will share these documents so that you can go back and take a closer look at exactly how I did this. All right, I hope that this was helpful, and as always, please feel free to be in touch with questions.